Okay, here's an easy one. Who's your favorite student?
So I think that's actually quite a hard question because I have had so many different students over the years. I had students when I was a classroom teacher. I've had students when I was an administrator, like Mr. Falk or Ms. Richardson are at the school. And now I have had a lot of students as a head of school at PBS. And so I don't think that it's possible to have a favorite because I really enjoyed all of them. I think there are students over time that I've either made a greater connection with because they were in my classroom and so we worked on projects together or papers, or maybe they visited me in my office a few times for conversations. And so I would say the easy part of that answer is I really enjoyed and consider all of my former students and current students as favorites. But I don't want to just choose one, although I'm sure you'd like me to answer that it's you, Dante.
What does the word diversity mean to you?
So I actually think that the diversity is a statement of fact because, at PBS, 69% of our students are students of color. That's diversity. That's a statement of fact. Diversity really defines what the facts are around how we think about the various ways to look at diversity, like culture or race or language is spoken, sexual orientation. I think diversity is different from equity or inclusion or multiculturalism, which are actually philosophical and important goals. So for me, diversity is about making sure that the PBS community, from a fact basis, represents a wide range of different perspectives and backgrounds so that you and your friends in class actually are in an environment that isn't all the same, but looks very different and represents the way the world looks. And I think that is super important. And that's how I would define diversity.
If you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
So I would like to think that on a good day, I could be inspiring. And inspiring means I really want to help people, um, feel like they want to do great things. A second word is I'd like to think that I'm an engaging person, that it's actually interesting to talk to me, that I can carry a conversation and enjoy conversing with, whether you're a student or a parent. I'd like to hope that a third word would be that I would be called kind, that you might not always like my decisions or like the things that I do or think they're the correct ways to go, but that I at least try on a good day to be kind about how I work with different people.
Yeah, for the better good. And I think that even though some decisions don't always seem the best, I think that you have to look at it from another perspective so you can see it, like understand it, how and incorporate it, how the other person is visualizing it.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good definition for empathy, trying to feel what it must be like to be the other person, Dante. That maybe the decision doesn't feel like it's the best one you might like, but it might be good for others or the whole. And so that's a really good way to think about it. I agree.
Have you been involved in LGBTQ plus organizations?
So I haven't been what I would describe as sort of a joiner, like a massive number of organizations that I join or, get on the board of or be part of. But I have certainly been part of discussions or groups where we're trying to have this dialogue about issues that are important for LGBTQ people. When I was a teacher first starting off in my career, we actually started an organization, a student organization at the school I worked at for LGBTQ students in particular. And I was one of the faculty chairs of that group. So I do feel like that was a really important organization because it helped students come together and talk about questions that are important for LGBTQ people. And I've also been involved in work that's tried to make sure that these issues are top of mind for people, that they're not the only things we talk about, but that that we're trying to support people who are LGBTQ are trying to be involved as leaders. So I wouldn't say that I'm a huge joiner of organizations, but I have really tried to be involved in supporting people who would find themselves as LGBTQ folks, so that they can feel supported and like they can participate in organizations. I mean, one of the things I like to think of, Dante, is that the way I feel about this is that from the best way for me to make issues for that community go better is if I should do the best job I can, so that a gay person can be a head of school and be successful, just like another person. And I think that sort of helps normalize that what we're looking for, say, in a principal or a head of school or a teacher, is a high quality person who has expertise in what they do, and that a person's sexual orientation doesn't impact the kind of job a person can do. And so sometimes, Dante, that means not joining like an official organization that's working towards something, but it actually means like coming to work every day, coming to campus every day, and working hard to do a really good job.
If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
When I read that question, because you gave me a little bit of a preview of some of this, it was a really hard one for me to answer because, you know, in COVID, it's been hard to travel places.
Well, maybe like imagine it as if there's no COVID.
Yes, so that's exactly so, or what happens when I can actually do it, right, after COVID?
Yeah.
I would like to give you two answers. Um, I have been wanting to travel back to Sweden, where I lived for 6 years and where I have family.
Mm-hmm.
I was meaning to go in the summer, but I couldn't go because of COVID. So, and it's been about 6 years since I've been, and I have very, very close family and friendships there. So I'm really, really eager to visit Sweden. And it's actually been a year since I visited my parents in Iowa and my other family members. I was planning to go in April, but couldn't because of COVID. I was planning to go in the summer, but couldn't because of COVID. So the second place is that I'm eager to visit my homestead, my hometown back in Iowa, so I can see my parents and other family members.
Got it. Who's who's someone that you believe really changed the LGBTQ plus community for the better?
Well, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts there that might be sort of interesting. I am really, really, I guess I would say I admire Associate Justice Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court, because he was appointed and viewed as what you might describe as a more conservative-minded justice on the Supreme Court, Dante. And he served on the Supreme Court for a long time. And when there were a couple of particularly important decisions for the LGBTQ community that came before the Supreme Court, he voted and was, I would describe as the swing vote, the vote that counted, to support issues that were important to LGBTQ people and their civil rights and their basic rights in this country. So that might sound like a strange answer, but I actually think that his support meant a lot to the LGBTQ community. And I've always been an admirer of his, even before that decision, but especially for that decision. Another person that I think about a lot is a former student of mine at the first school I worked, who actually came out. And he was the first student who was openly gay at that school. I was the first faculty member who was openly gay. And I think he did a lot, Dante, to change the perspectives of some people and to put that issue not like front and center, but to make it as part of the normal dialogue at the school and to make it okay to be openly gay. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for changing some perspectives and also for normalizing that this is a conversation we can have, and it can be really cool to have this conversation, and that it's a component of diversity that's important. So there's sort of one really famous person from the Supreme Court who's now retired, and then a former student who I think in one particular community really advanced this dialogue in an important way quite some years ago.
What is your favorite core value?
That's another really tough one. It's like your first question, my favorite students, because I actually like all of our core values. Um, Probably the one that resonates with me the most, because I think it kind of is overarching. It's like the core value that means something for everything else is our core value of community. I think that we are courageous in our community, we are kind in our community, we love learning in our community. And I certainly feel very fortunate to be part of the PBS community right now during this time. I always have felt that way. I know that's true for you, Dante, as a student. You shared that with me before. So I think that we have a very special community at PBS, and I think we should cherish it, and I think we should safeguard it to make sure it always stays very special.
How do strong values make us better people?
So on that question, I think that our actions and our behaviors as people stem from our values. So I don't think we act and then try to figure out what the value was. I think it's actually those four core values that stay at the foundation, and all of our behaviors and actions emerge from those. So for me, um, if we don't have values and if we don't believe in them, our actions are going to be all over the map. So, when I think about student behavior or adult behavior in the PBS community, or I think about my own behavior or actions, I think about courage, kindness, love of learning, and community, and really look in the mirror for myself or look in the eyes of our community members and really want to assess and evaluate, does this behavior or do these actions stem from those four core values? Because if they don't, then I think there's what I would call a misalignment, or something's askew, it's not quite right. And that, Dante, becomes something that we have to take care of, because we may have different belief systems, we come from different families, we may have different skin colors, or we speak different languages at home, but what we share in common is our mission and those four core values. And they need to happen in action and we need to model them in school. And I think we need to model them at home and outside the school. So that when people see you, Dante, at, you're taking a music lesson or you're elsewhere, they can say, those values really shine through. I see them.
How is the LGBTQ plus representation where you grew up?
Could you say that? What's the last part of the question?
How was LGBTQ plus representation where you grew up?
Oh, sort of like what my upbringing was like. Well, I can tell you it was very different than yours. You live in a fairly populated, like there's a lot of people living in the Bay Area. It's urban and suburban, where I think people have a pretty broad understanding of what the world is like. You go to a school, Dante, where there are representatives of the LGBTQ community in the parent body, in our family community, among our teachers and staff. And so there's just a lot of examples, a lot of role models walking around. And you live in this really interesting, Bay Area where this dialogue has been ongoing for decades. I mean, well before many parts of the country. I mean, I was your age a handful of decades ago. I mean, I'm now 53. So, I'm, well along past you. And I also grew up in a very rural agricultural area where there just wasn't a lot of representation around or role modeling, even on television or in movies. And so it wasn't until I was in college and graduate school, so when I was in my late teens and early 20s, when I started actually knowing other people who were like me. And I would say that was a bit of a struggle because, Dante, you know other people who have gay parents or who are from gay communities or have gay friends. And so that just sort of makes your experience a little different than mine was growing up. It's not right or wrong or better or worse. It's just different. And I would say I'm somewhat wishing that I could have had that environment growing up. It might have made things different for me. But we all have our journeys. And my goal as an educator is related to what I said earlier. I just want to make sure that people um, understand and respect and have dialogue about this issue so the world can be a better place for LGBTQ people.
What was your perception of the LGBTQ plus community when you were younger?
Well, I think there were a lot of misconceptions. Um, I think that because there weren't, teachers or dentists or accountants or bankers or grocers or people in the community that were doing their jobs and doing their thing, just like everyday life, I think it was easier to have misconceptions because of the media, like on the news. And so I remember that the perceptions that I often formed when I was your age was, you'd see pictures of a gay pride parade, right? Because those have actually been going on for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that that was the kind of perception that felt regular everyday life for me. And so it felt a little bit outside of my experience because it was happening in big cities, not in my area. And it also looked what I would describe as a little bit different than what I was used to. So I really like the fact that nowadays the LGBTQ community is more integrated in everyday fabric of life. So we are the dentists and the bankers and the heads of school and the teachers, which makes it feel like it's much more part of the everyday fabric. So it was actually very different when I was growing up in terms of my own perceptions.
How'd I do on the interview?
I think you're a very tough interviewer. No, I think you're an outstanding interviewer. I actually think you asked really good questions, and I know you've thought a lot about this. I would love to know what you're planning to do with all of this good work. What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm thinking about interviewing some other people too for Gay History Month. And I think that it's good practice too from because if maybe when I'm older I might interview some people and that, now I have some experience with it.
Yes, I think from what it sounds like, you're trying to take the real life experiences of some people you know, and that becomes part of the story, right, for Gay History Month, when we're elevating or celebrating the history of people who represent that community. And the great thing is that you're getting some interview skill practice because oftentimes in your next 5 to 8 years, Dante, you're going to be the one being interviewed, whether it's for a variety of different things. And now you got to be the one doing the interview. So it's a really, really good practice for you. I think you've done a great job, and I'm really glad you're doing this project. And I hope it is a way that feels very enriching and invigorating for you.